The ruling elite, they have to try to get the masses of people to believe that, their ideology is right. We at the top, you at the bottom. This is the way God wants it. And the question is, now we are in a time where we got the technology to see things from the moon, from other places. So we know certain things are coming in to this country that the government knows about. And the question is, why don't they stop it? And a lot of times the masses of people can't direct their energy toward the cause of why they suffer. So a lot of times they take that anger home, they take it out on their children, they take it out on their community, and they take the drugs to escape their reality of being in a hopeless situation. And so that's why I think the church has to get involved. And then the church has to connect with other groups that understand that we are in an oppressive situation. And it's not just about color. This is about economics. This is about your lifestyle. And this is also about being dominated by the ruling elite that are constantly thinking of ways to stay at the top.
It's such an honor for us to have you here with us again.
Yes.
Dr. Reginald Davis, you have been on this show before and you are one of our very preferred guests because your outlook on life and your deep understanding of the world we live in is such a valuable contribution also to our viewers.
Thank you.
And we've had many, many very good responses on the shows with you as well. So for this reason, we're very glad to have you again. You are a PhD out of Florida State University, and you are a very well-known radio lecturer all over America, and a famous author as well.
Well, I do my best.
And to add to it, you are the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Virginia, which is a historic church that dates back to, I do believe it's year 1776?
1776,
One
that's
of the
correct.
earliest Black American churches in the United States.
That's correct, that's correct. First Baptist Church, was birthed in the context of oppression. Black people wanted to express their way of worshiping God, their way of singing. And so they were in the brush harbors there. And a white guy named Mr. Cole saw them and how they were worshiping their God, and he offered to give them his carriage house. And from there, they became the First Baptist Church. But they had to hide out in the brush harbors and places like that because they didn't want to be seen or heard in the way that they worshiped their God. Because it was dangerous back in that time to do that, because everything that the slave would do could be considered subversive to the institution of slavery. So the whole First Baptist Church was birthed in that kind of context, and it's just fortunate that they've been able to perpetuate this congregation even up until this time. So I'm just happy that I am part of the ongoing history of this congregation.
And growing up in Africa, I must say those spirituals, those songs
Yes.
that they, and the whole value system,
Yes.
and the love, that stemmed and came out of that
Right.
initial culture,
Yes.
really should inspire the young today.
Absolutely. Well, at that time, they had to stick together because they understood the structures, they understood what was against them. And so they had to stick together in order that they might survive such a horrific and inhumane institution called slavery. And so that in itself pushed them to come together, to stay together. And we definitely need that togetherness today, because so much has infiltrated our streets, infiltrated our families, our homes and schools. And so we're looking at the disintegration of the American society because the values that we used to have years ago are nil to none today.
It's very interesting when you look at the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights, because those were the founding values that lay a foundation for the growth of the American culture and the American state and
That's
the
correct.
United States of America,
Right.
which has been such a prosperous place.
Yes.
With such values of freedom,
Yes.
the freedom of speech, the freedom of the respect for diversity.
Yes.
And that's just the beauty of it.
Right.
And respect for
Sure.
precisely that plurality.
Exactly. And that's what the African American people were fighting for. Because the Constitution did not include us initially, it did not include us. It was the espoused theory of the founding fathers. But the theory in practice was that it held another group of people enslaved. That group of people could not roam about freely. They had no freedom at all. So there was no freedom of speech. There was no freedom to do this, that, and the other. So they had to keep struggling to be included in the Constitution by struggle, by appealing to the conscience of people. And so it's still an ongoing struggle to make sure that we all can live up to the Constitution of the United States of America.
And frankly, we live in a special time today as we see
Yes.
precisely many of those constitutional values, though maybe not always applied,
Right.
as you're saying,
Exactly.
to everybody. At
Exactly.
least it was an ideal that we're striving to have a society.
Right.
But we see that much of this is deteriorating into a censorship, and some may say an enslavement of the whole population today, white and black and Hispanics alike.
Yes. When they say, let's make America great again. And what we try to say is, when was America great in that it included all of the people, where we all were the beneficiaries of the Constitution. And so we can get there. I mean, we were progressing, but there are efforts made now to divide the country. We're no longer the United States of America by practice. We may be the United States of America by name, but by practice we have become divided nation of America, because we are divided down politics, we are divided down social, economic, you name it, religion, all of those things that should be working to make the Constitution what it was meant to be is really working against us. And so when you don't have leaders that's pushing for the unity of the people and the unity of diversity, then you're going to have a breakdown in your country. And that's what is happening in America today. And so the social structures in America, they have to undergo transformation. If people are going to stay in power, they're going to do all they can to make sure that those at the top remain at the top. And so a lot of manipulation is going on to make sure that those who have been in power stay in power. I think that when they start looking to see that there are a lot of females getting in places of prominence, when the oppressors see that their numbers are beginning to dwindle, they have to do something to manipulate the system to make sure that they remain in power. Now, as I said to you before, this system does not mind making changes, but they are not going to correct this. See, the goal is to have it like this, to have equality. But right now it's like this. And so when you got people at the top of the economic and social heap, and people at the bottom, you have to keep that system the way it is. And we talk about trickle-down economics. It never trickles down. They want to keep the power at the top in order to control the working class at the bottom. And so a whole lot of manipulation goes on. The invasion of drugs is one way to keep the working class, or the people at the bottom, the oppressed, from really concentrating on why they are oppressed, why they're at the bottom, why they have become a permanent working class. And so you have to bring in everything to keep people's minds offer really understanding the cause of why they suffer.
But there must be something that happened around 1990. I do believe that's when the globalist thrust came into the system, really full force in the 90s.
Right.
But when you look at the American system, you have to go back to 1987
Yes.
to get the peak year for the middle class income.
Yes.
And from then on, and throughout the 90s and the 2000s, we've seen a sharp rise in the ultra-rich class. I do believe Oxfam now states around 60%,
Sure.
individuals now own more than half of world assets. So we're in a kind of a type of international economic system that departs from the nation-based capitalist structure in which nations and the country defended certain bills of rights, right to own property, right to, like we said, freedom of speech, right to not be battered by police in your own home, whatever.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, right to civil protests, for example.
Sure, absolutely.
And we see the breakdown of that correlating with the breakdown of the middle class.
Yes, at the expense of the middle class. If you got the ultra rich or the super rich, they can only get that way by manipulating the system. And so we've seen a significant decline of the middle class. And that's only because the super rich want to remain in power. It's all about domination. It's all about control. And so when you get greed built in a system, then you're going to have all types of manipulation going on to make sure that the people at the top become even more wealthy. And so this whole push of who's going to be in the billionaire category, you know. So if you had a few people in the billionaire category, now you got other people that want to get into that same category. And you want to get in that category by any means necessary. You're not really concerned about the people. You're concerned about being in that category. Now, when the billionaire category gets big enough, somebody's going to want to be in the trillionaire category. And then before you know it, you're going to have everybody trying to get into this trillionaire category, which means that more resources going to be concentrated at the top, which means that the ultra-rich or the ruling elite were going to be thinking about, how can I become richer? How can I control the resources of the nation, the resources where I'm at the top of the social heap? And so it's a shame that people think that way, but that's what's going on today. So they're not really thinking about the masses of people. They're only thinking about profit and power.
But is that really something new? You just discussed the historic church that you are the pastor of, and how in the 1770s and early 1800s, everything, it was not all that easy for certain groups in society here as well. They knew they were oppressed.
Yes.
They knew they had to stick to their whatever role in society and not evolve out of that.
Right.
But isn't that the way we see that yet happening again today?
Absolutely.
Isn't that the ruling empire that also existed in the Roman times?
Absolutely.
We know at those phases too, Christians had to keep quiet. They knew if they said too much, they would be burning torches for Nero.
Absolutely. But also, we know that America is on the same trajectory as the Roman Empire. As that empire collapsed, so will America. And so will other nations collapse, because you cannot control people by violence too long, because the masses of people are going to rise up somewhere, somehow. The ruling elite, they have to try to get the masses of people to believe that, you know, their ideology is right. We at the top, you at the bottom. This is the way God wants it. And the question is, now we are in a time where we got the technology to see things from the moon, from other places. We can zoom in on that. So we know certain things are coming in to this country that the government knows about. And the question is, why don't they stop it? Well, first of all, you got a demand of the masses of people. And a lot of times the masses of people can't direct their energy toward the cause of why they suffer. So a lot of times they take that anger home, they take it out on their children, they take it out on their community, and they take the drugs to escape their reality of being in a hopeless situation. And so that's why I think the church has to get involved, and then the church has to connect with other groups that understand that we are in an oppressive situation. And it's not just about color. This is about economics. This is about your lifestyle. And this is also about being dominated by the ruling elite that are constantly thinking of ways to stay at the top.
And it's very interesting because Bishop Harry Jackson is also one of our favorite guests and
right.
a reoccurring guest on our show. And he has stated that the civil rights movement is now being reduced to just a black thing, as if that was the only thing that movement was about, was the empowerment of black people in America. But he says it was the empowerment of free speech. It was precisely the continuation of the right in the Bill of Rights, the right to protest, the right to disagree with the system. It was also a Christian movement that wanted to push the values, really. We should love one another. That was a major thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was birthed out of the church. The civil rights movement was really birthed out of the church.
Martin Luther King was a Christian.
He was a Christian, and he was a preacher and a pastor. But the movement birthed out of the church. That's where it got most of its momentum, got most of its energy from the church. But I want to point out that if you go back in our history, in 1875, I believe, that we had civil rights. Civil rights was on the books in America. But the problem was that those laws were not enforced. And so you can have laws, but if you don't enforce those laws, it's almost like you don't have laws at all. So what the civil rights movement did was to bring the country, or bring the oppressed group back up to what it already had 100 years earlier. Now think about this. If you had it on the books and it was passed by Congress, then why would it take 100 years to bring you back up to what you had already, what you already have on the books 100 years earlier? That's what the civil rights movement had done. And so the thing about it is, laws are no greater than their enforcers. If you don't enforce the law, then those who control things will make sure that you don't benefit from those laws. And so this is why it is so important for people to get involved in the political process, to understand what their rights are. And I agree with Mr. Jackson that it wasn't just a black thing. This was an American thing.
Yes.
This is an American thing. And so we have to understand that it's going to take movement. But somehow over time, we have gone to sleep. We've gone to sleep. We think that since the civil rights movement has come about, we've gone to sleep. And just like they said, if you cool off, you get into a deep freeze. And so we've gotten into a deep freeze in which we see all of these injustices and all of these things are coming back. And so we have to get that revolutionary spirit back up again. We have to start talking about and being concerned about the social conditions, because the economic conditions are driving us, hopefully, that we'll connect to be able to transform this very system in which we live in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you look at the dire statistics of drug abuse in the United States, the numbing statistics, around 27 million people in this country are on drugs.
Yes.
And 7 out of 10, according to the Mayo Clinic, are on prescription drugs.
Yes.
It's a massive problem you have on your southern border.
Yes.
When you look at the $100 billion annual revenue of the drug industry,
right?
I mean, it's obvious that somebody's doing this to their own people.
Yes. Profit, power, by any means necessary. people are within the system. So therefore, if laws are going to prevent me from making the kind of profit I need to make, then I would have to go underground. I would have to participate in some underground market. But the goal is profit and power. The more money I have, the more power that I can assume for myself and for others. And so there is no really direct action to really stop the drugs from coming in, because now we have a demand. The only way you're going to stop the drugs, you're going to have to cut the demand. As long as there's a high demand for the drugs, somebody going to be the supplier. Somebody going to benefit from that. So this $100 billion industry, I'm afraid, is going to get worse, because people are trying to escape their reality. And they're taking drugs, alcohol, whatever they need to take to escape their reality. Just like the slaves, they didn't take drugs. The spirituals that they saw gave them split moments of transcendence. That's the way they dealt with a hopeless situation. They hoped against hopelessness. So in our society today, because of the dwindling of the church influence in the lives of many people, other people are taking other routes to deal with their sense of hopelessness. And it's a tragic situation because the church is there, but a lot of people are opting to get help and escape through drugs and alcohol and other forms of addictions.
It's wonderful talking to you, sir. You always are so knowledgeable and have this great depth of understanding of the current affairs in America and in the West also. And we thank you very much for taking the time
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Reginald Davis.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming and discussing these important topics.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Glad to be here.